too. I'm here today on the floor again because I wanted to include the pets because they're just too cute. And so, okay, I'll sacrifice and sit on the floor for a bit. So I'm here to do my September wrap-up. Surprisingly, I read quite a few books considering I had a really busy beginning of the month because I was training a new person that was replacing me at my old job. Then I packed up my apartment, moved across the country, moved into a new apartment, and I'm starting I had to did a bunch of interviews, and I'm starting a new job. But yeah, I still managed to read quite a number of books. So yeah, let's get into it. Her eyes are just like, hopefully, like, from least on my end, her eyes are like startling with this light. So yeah, hopefully you can see that on your end with the camera. So I'll just go in the order in which I read them. So the first book, and a lot of these are like lighter books. I didn't read a lot of nonfiction because I just wanted like some nice like genre fiction, like romances or mystery thrillers, something that was like easy to pick up without me having to delve a lot into like thinking about it because I had so much going on that I needed something easy for me to read. And so the first one is Susan Mallory's California Girls. And this was one of the last books that I was reading for the Romance Book Bingo that got pushed over into this month. And so, yeah, this one is about sisters from California, and it's Finola, Zini, and Allie. And one of them is in Hollywood. She's working as in the news media, and so she's very like into keeping fit and eating clean, and she's dealing with her husband cheating on her. And then there's Zini, who they all kind of like breakups. Zini's breakup is no big loss. It's saying because she doesn't really want a relationship. She's more of like an independent woman, and so it's like kind of like her like defining herself with not having to identify with a man in order to be like who she is. And then Allie is the youngest one, and she's just getting ready to get married, and something happens where the marriage is the wedding is canceled. And so yeah, it's all three of them are dealing with relationship issues, but also the relationships of the sisters as well. How they're constantly in battle with each other because they're all leading like different lives with like different perspectives of what a relationship should be. So yeah, there's that one. And then I read a thriller, Knife Creek by Paul Duran. You can see that. And this is the first book I read in this series. It's the Mike Bowditch series, and this is book number 8. And this is set in Maine. And I think the setting for this book really is its own like character because the description of the scenes and how like the rain or like the swamps or the rivers and all that play a huge part in the story. And this is following. Mike Bowditch is a game warden, and for this one, because I read 2 of them, for this one and this book, he's out in the forest, shooting wild boars, because like they're destroying the forest. And while he's out there, he discovers a baby that's been half buried, and so like the boars, the wild pigs are like eating the baby. It's kind of gruesome, but so that's kind of opens the story of who killed the baby, and it's also like his progression into possibly moving up into like management or like getting out of his position he's in as a game warden. Because I'm guessing from like the way he was talking, this is book 8 in the series. He's been a game warden for most of this series, and so like now he's like reaching a point where he is wanting to branch out a bit. So it does focus on his career, but mostly, of course, it's focusing on the thriller of who did it, and he kind of gets embroiled in this mystery, and like these people kind of come after him because it's a small town in Maine. And with a baby, it's like very like high emotional stakes. So yeah, that was that one. And then I read going back to a room, like I'm kind of like yo-yoing back and forth. So this next one is Debbie Macomber's Cottage by the Sea. And when you want something that's lighthearted, then you can't go wrong with Debbie Macomber. And so this one is about Annie, and she has a tragedy struck her family when on a holiday, all of her family is up in Washington over Thanksgiving, I believe it was. But she's by herself in Los Angeles. She just has to stay because it's only going to be a couple of days, and she'll be back for Christmas. And she says, okay, I'll skip this one holiday. But unfortunately, something happens where she loses all of her family. And so this is all about her coming to terms with that, a lot of grief. And, of course, because Debbie Macomber is also a romance. And so she meets a man, and kind of like he helps her through her journey. But anyway, so she moves from LA to the cottage by the sea is literally a cottage by the sea where she kind of comes to terms with everything. And it's like she picks this spot because her counselors were saying, find a place that where were you happy, like find like that memory. And so she just a cottage by the sea is where she was vacationing as a child over summer vacation. So she remembers lots of fond memories there. So she decides to go back as an adult after all this has happened to like have like peace. And so she's not like bogged down with work, or so she's like really focused on kind of like by herself without having her friends. Everyone like keep asking her, how are you doing, she wants to kind of be left alone a bit. And so it's a story of her living in this like cute little city by the sea, not city, little town by the sea, and of course meeting the man. Well, the man was interesting because the male role was a guy who he wasn't mute, but he had a really hard time speaking. So he would only say a couple of words each time he met her. He was really shy, but not only shy, but he just was the man of very few words. And so I thought it was interesting to have this kind of like a really different male lead for a romance book. And then the next one I read was Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. And this is one I actually listened to on audio while I was, traipsing across the country. And so I read The Underground Railroad. And so, I was like, everyone was talking about Nickel Boys, and so I wanted to read it. And this is all about the civil rights movement. And it's academy that the main character is Elwood Curtis. And he kind of finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so he gets swept away to like a juvenile detention. And it's all about like how the race, even though it was in the 1960s, people were still being split up. So it's like in the juvenile facility, it was still male blacks versus whites. And it was it wasn't the easiest read to be reading while I was everything was going on in my life. But it was very, very good. I think I've read both of Colson Whitehead's novels, and both of them hit it out of the park. So that was that one. And then I read The Babysitters Club. Mary Ann Saves the Day. This is book number 4 by Ann M. Martin. And I've been waiting to read this one for quite a while. But there was this really long hold on this one in particular. I don't know. It took me weeks and weeks to get it. And so I happened to get it this month. And so I was like, yay, I finally got it. And so this one follows Mary Ann. And so she's the babysitter who is quiet and kind of like docile. She doesn't really stand up for herself. And so in this book, it's all about how she is going to stand up to her father, who is very much a rules man, who she must adhere to all of the rules. And so she's like, I'm not a baby anymore. I am a babysitter. I think they're, I don't know how old they are. I think they're like 12 or so. And she's like, I'm a teenager now. And so I don't need like frilly like dolls and stuff. I am coming into my own person. And so along with her battling with her father, she's also in a battle with all of the babysitters because there's a fight that breaks out. And so they've all kind of like split up into their own groups. And so she actually makes a friend of her own outside the Babysitters Club. And let's see her name. I'm horrible with names. Let's see if it doesn't mention the friend's name. But I read it at the beginning of the month, so I can't remember her name. But I think she's gonna be in the upcoming Babysitters Club. But it was a really nice story, and it was like exactly what I needed at the time. And then I read bookmarked Reading My Way from Hollywood to Brooklyn, and this is by Wendy W. Ferry. Here's that one. And this is all about Wendy's memoir, basically, of her reading life, but also she's a really interesting story because her mother, Sheila Graham, was a Hollywood columnist. And not only that, but she was like the mistress of F. Scott Fitzgerald. And Fitzgerald had set Sheila, her mother, up with like kind of like this, I think it was like College of One is what Fitzgerald called it. And so he had picked out a certain amount of books that Sheila needed to read. And so Wendy, growing up, read these books and kind of like took it as her own education. So she had a really interesting connection to Fitzgerald, and meeting with all the Hollywood celebrities that that Sheila took her to. And she wasn't even that interested in meeting these like famous people. She was like actually sitting in a corner reading a book while all these like with makeup was being done by these famous people or what have you at parties and stuff. And so it was a really interesting memoir. And of course, reading about people who love books is always fun. And in this particular book, she focuses on not a lot of different books, which I would have wanted more, but she really goes in depth. If you want an in-depth review or a person's insight onto a book, then this one is really good for that, because she goes in a really long detail on Charles Dickens, George Eliot, Virginia Woolf, Henry James, and in particular David Copperfield and Daniel Deronda. Those are the two that she really, and Jane Eyre as well, really goes in depth with, and like how she like talks about how she was using them throughout her life, and so that one, it was really good. But I would have wanted more of like a broad spectrum of like what she's been reading all throughout her life. But it is good for going in depth with these. But I haven't read all of these books, especially like Henry James, Daniel Deronda. I haven't read, and I've only read a couple of Virginia Woolf, and I've only read a couple of Charles Dickens as well. But anyway, my long story short with that is, if you don't want to be spoiled, then you might want to skip over several of the paragraphs, which I'm okay being spoiled, like the classics. I mean, the books can hold on their own with me knowing the ending. But yeah, so you want to keep that in mind if you're gonna pick this book up. Let's see, the next one is a romance. This is kind of blurry, but it's The Road to Three Creeks by Karen Todd. And this was a light, like fluffy romance, but it also was kind of like a thriller in a way, because this is following Emily Moore, and so she is living in this really small town, and she's like she's grown up there, and she's like, a lot of her friends and family have moved away, but she has stayed, and so she doesn't really have much of a relationship with any men, and so this man comes to town who is kind of like taking care of her neighbor's house while he's mysteriously away. And at first, it's like, he's away, visiting a relative, taking care of a sick relative. But as time progresses, like, why is he still away? He's like, in the caretaker of the house doesn't really have a good explanation for it. But meanwhile, he is developing a relationship with her, and that's her first really encounter with a man. But since she doesn't have much history with men, she doesn't really know what to think of his actions, because some of it is suspicious. And she's like, is this how all guys act, or what? And so, that was interesting. I don't want to give away the ending of what the mystery is, but there's a reason why. It wasn't like a predictable mystery either. Like, I was thinking it would be such an interesting thing, but it was completely different. So it was really a surprising twist to the story, which I liked in a romance. This next one is 4th of July Creek by Smith Henderson. And this is set in Montana, and this was a really interesting story as well. It's following Benjamin Pearl. What is the main character's guy's name? Okay, Pete Snow. Pete Snow is the main character you're following, and he's a social worker, and it's following his struggle with parenting with an estranged wife and raising a teenage daughter. And it also focuses a bit on the teenage daughter and her journey, and like how she's like, growing up to be a young lady, and like the mistakes and trials that she goes through. But so it's interesting, like it's following him as a social worker, so you think he'd be a really good parent, but no, he isn't. It focuses a lot on him drinking and partying and hanging out with like the wrong crowd. But meanwhile, he's trying to raise this 14-year-old daughter, and he's a social worker, so it's a lot. Most of it is focusing on his relationship with the Pearl family, in particular Benjamin Pearl and Jeremiah were the two. And Benjamin Pearl is a young boy, and he comes wandering into town, and he looks disheveled, and he's like just aghast at everything. So he wasn't raised in a town. He has no idea what a school is, what are these books. He has no idea, and so Pete Snow takes him on as a case, and so he takes him back to the woods where he's being raised by Benjamin Pearl, and come to find out that Benjamin is kind of like a madman of sorts. He believes like the world is ending, and he is like the new Messiah, and he's like, by all cost and all means necessary, he's going to protect his family from the world ending. And so he sees Pete Snow as the social worker, as a bad guy, and so it's like he's kind of contesting with I'm like hairs everywhere floating in the air. What was I saying? I lost my train of thought with the hair. But yeah, so he's battling the father basically to take care of the son, but also himself as well, because he is not in the best of health. because they're not on a farm or anything like that. They're just like shooting animals and eating them with like grubs and stuff they're finding on the ground, and so they're not getting all the vitamins they need, and so like there's sickness and whatnot involved with that, and so they don't always have the right clothing as well. And so yeah, the social worker is like, it's all about really like the social worker being pulled in all these different directions with him himself, like with his drinking and his like hanging out with the wrong crowd, with the estranged wife and the daughter and all that's going on, and then also his job as a social worker. So he's in a tough spot. So yeah, that's an explanation of that one. And then I read a thriller, Stay Hidden, and this is the 9th book by Paul Doran. And this follows a woman who was shot, and this is also in Maine, and a woman it's really interesting because I don't know a lot about Maine. I've never visited there, but there's a bunch of islands. They're off the coast, and so this is like one of the farthest islands, like from the coast, from the mainland, and a woman is shot and killed because the newspaper that they get, and like the cops are saying that she was accidentally shot because they thought she was a deer because she was hanging up white clothing on a clothing line, and so they thought like the white clothing, little cloth she was hanging up, was the turn of when a deer runs away, like their little white tail that sticks up, and so that's like the premise. And so he goes, Mike Bowditch goes and investigates this. Just it sounds like an open and shut case. So who accidentally shot her? It was a complete accident, but of course, with a thriller, there's a lot more involved than that. It wasn't an accident, and it was an investigation that involved. And so it was an interesting setting because, like I said, it's an island, so it's like everyone kind of is against the cop because they kept telling him, when you leave, I still have to live here, and so I don't want to make enemies with the few people who live here. It's kind of like these old, like redneck kind of like people who are fighting with each other. When I think of redneck, I think there's two. I can't remember the names, but there's two brothers who are driving these like big trucks with like mud and huge tires, and they're like with chewing tobacco, and like so they're constantly fighting with not only the cop but the family as well, the other families in town. So they're kind of so Mike Bowditch has a really hard time investigating because no one's really helping him, is the point. And so yeah, this was an interesting, really fast-paced read. And then I read Out of the Shadows: Reimagining Gay Men's Lives by Walt Oditz. And this was to me a wild read. I think I started reading at the beginning, if not in August, beginning of September or end of August. But because, like I said, I had so much going on that this was not the way I wanted to pick up on a really stressful month. But so also, I was slowly picking at it throughout the whole month. And Walt Oditz is a psychologist in San Francisco, and he himself is gay, and so he has a really strong connection with his patients. And it also, he doesn't just go into detail on his patients' lives and struggles, but he also talks about his own struggles and his own past. So like sometimes he'll talk about, especially the AIDS epidemic is huge in this book, and so he talks about his own, not only what the patients are going through, his clients, but also he himself, like people he knew who have died, or like people he was really close with, who passed away. And so yeah, this was a riveting book, very, very informative for gay men. It doesn't just talk about the past, but it also talks about present day, like how people are still struggling with AIDS. Like the statistics for that was astounding. I didn't know that how people were still like procuring this illness at a pretty high rate. So yeah, that was really interesting. But he talks also about the medications that the technology we have advanced, and so it isn't a death sentence to get HIV or AIDS. There's a medication regimen you can go on, and so I found all of that really interesting. It really focuses on like 3 different categories of gay men. The first ones are like who grew up without AIDS and were just coming into like being gay and it being more acceptable in society, and then AIDS hits, and so they're just like crushed with that, and like so many people died. And then this middle group is people who kind of come of age while all the AIDS is happening, and then the third group was like the younger generation who have grown up with AIDS being kind of behind them in the past. And so yeah, it's interesting how all 3 of them have kind of like he talks about how the relationships, how because of what each of the groups have gone through, how that affects them in their day-to-day lives, and also the parents who have raised each of these different groups, what were they like? And so all that was let's see, hopefully I didn't lose the screen went the screensaver went on, so hopefully I didn't lose anything. So yeah, that was that one. And then I read going from a gay nonfiction book, I read We Contain Multitudes, which is like an LGBT YA book. And this is following, it's an epistolary novel, and it's following Jonathan Hopkirk and Adam Kurlansky. And so this is about one boy, Jonathan is out and about, and he's known as being gay. And so he's assigned with Curl, he's like this tough guy who is into sports, and so they start this like dialogue. So the teacher forces them to write a letter to like a pen pal of sorts, and so it's like how they become friends, and then how they develop a relationship, and the conflict that's involved with Jonathan being gay, and how the high school there's still bullies, and so how Curl eventually starts to stick up for him, and the consequences that are involved in that. And so this was like a nice kind of pairing, a lighter version of what was talked about a bit in Out of the Shadows. And then I read 2 library books. I read The Photo Arc, and this was done by National Geographic, and this is a one-man's quest to document the world's animals, and I loved this book. It was so good. And so yeah, I'll just show you a bunch of pictures. And so he has photos of each of the animals, like really up close, and then he also has like their Latin name, and then they have a little symbol by each of them, and he says, are they extinct? Are they endangered? What's their risk of extinction? So I'll show you a couple more. And this is a picture of birds. So actually, one of the commenters, I think Michelle, was mentioning that there is the photo arc that's focused just on birds, and so I'm gonna pick that one up next when I return this from the library. So there's all these really cool pictures, and I mean each one is just this huge picture. And so like I like how some of them are kind of like are paired. So this is like kind of like a pinkish, and then so then he has like something it kind of looks similar a bit. Let's see. So like this one, there was like this coral, like, and then there's also like a wasp nest, which have kind of like similar imagery. So these 2 are like horned animals. So yeah, it's like endlessly fascinating. And then I also from the library I got Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this, as I mentioned, when I was just exploring the area, one of the first things that I did was go to the library. And so this book in California had like a 6-month waiting list when I initially was like looking at it, but I think now it has like 2-month waiting list. But this was actually just sitting there on the shelves in the North Carolina library. So okay, I'll pick this up. It's meant to be for me to read it. And this is kind of like a fairy tale retelling of it's like the Cinderella story. But it's focusing on the Jazz Age, and it's Cassiopeia Tunn is the main character, and so she is kind of like taking over the house. She is kind of like being conducted by her cousin. So what her cousin name is? Because again, I can't remember names. But anyway, her cousin is very overbearing, and he's around her age, but because he I don't know, he's the male of the family, and so he has the power over her, and so he's telling her what to do, and so she's very resentful of him. And so she somehow she like goes into her grandfather's room and unearths this box of bones. And so when she's by herself, she's just like cleaning, and she unboxes these bones. And so magically, what pops out of this is what do they call it? It's like a Mayan god. And so there's hair flying everywhere when I like close this. So she unearths this Mayan god, and so because she's the one who woke him up, she has to help him pick up the pieces of his life to restore him as a god, because he's in there because his brother is the one who I don't want to block the kitty cat. His brother is the one who put him there because his brother wanted control of the Mayan area in the Yucatan, and so it's all about her journey in helping the god and kind of like growing up a bit and kind of like getting out of under the shadow of her very controlling family. Yeah, this one was good. I'm not that big of a fan of like fairy tales. I've read like the Grimm fairy tales, and I've read a couple of fairy tale retellings. But so yeah, I didn't know going in what this was all about. I didn't realize it was a fairy tale thing. It was good, but see, my problem is with retellings is I feel like I can't really get immersed in the story, if that makes sense. Like I felt like I was reading like a fairy tale, if that makes sense. Like it didn't really pull me in, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it was still really good for a retelling. It's probably one of the better retellings that I read. Yeah, these are the books I read. I don't know, I didn't count how many books that was, but I read quite a few for all that was going on. But yeah, I'm so glad all that's in the past, and so hopefully my October reading will be back up to normal, even though this was still a lot for a crazy month. I didn't know until the end what all I had read, because I think a lot, since I was going through a lot of stress, I used reading as like not only my entertainment, but as like my like calming, de-stressing moments. And so yeah, I think I squeezed in as much reading as I could each day, because I needed that that mental break from everything that was going on. So yeah, thanks. I'll see you soon, book 2.